Hello friends, we're coming to you from the Washington D.C. United Lodge of Theosophists. Today's talk is on the New Year. We're physically closed due to COVID-19, but you're invited to join us at Google Meet, which is the address shown on the next slide. We're also inviting you to please take a look at our website, www.ultdc.org, to get more information on who we are and see a variety of talks that have been given by the Lodge in the past, as well as today's talk. We subscribe to the Declaration of the United Lodge of Theosophists, which is it's shown on the back of our program. So we don't protest attachment to any theosophical organization. We're loyal to the great founders, but don't concern ourselves with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The end we have in view is too absorbing and too lofty to leave us the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. We hold that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching. This similarity is the sole bond between our associates. Our aim is to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. We regard as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization. And we welcome to our association all those who are in accord with these declared purposes and who desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. We're going to have a reading and then a talk.
Today's reading comes from the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna. A man is said to be confirmed in spiritual knowledge when he forsaketh every desire which entereth into his heart, and of himself is happy and content in the self through the self. His mind is undisturbed in adversity, he is happy and contented in prosperity, and he is a stranger to anxiety, fear, and anger. Such a man is called a muni, when in every condition he receives each event, whether favorable or unfavorable, with an equal mind, which neither likes nor dislikes. His wisdom is established, and having met good or evil, neither rejoiceth at the one, nor is cast down by the other. He is confirmed in spiritual knowledge, when like the tortoise, he can draw in all his senses and restrain them from their wanted purposes. The hungry man loseth sight of every other object but the gratification of his appetite. And when he is become acquainted with the Supreme, he loseth all taste for objects of whatever kind. Tumultuous senses and organs hurry away by force the heart, even the wise man who striveth after perfection. Let a man, restraining all these, remain in devotion at rest in me, his true self, for he who hath his senses and organs in control possesses spiritual knowledge. New Year. What makes the New Year the real New Year? Well, the scientists of the last century said the whole past of the earth is nothing but an unfolded present. A present-day physicist observes events do not happen. We come across them. These ideas have their synthesis and their explanation in the two statements of the secret doctrine. 1. Matter, after all, is nothing else than the sequence of our own states of consciousness. 2. Time is only an illusion produced by the succession of our states of consciousness as we travel through eternal duration. This view is through the eye of the changeless, all-perceiving spirit. Cycle produced by the succession and sequence of our own states of consciousness are illusions per se, the concrete realities for the entities of whose experience they form a part. We, as such entities, it is said, must exhaust the experience of every plane before we may reach to wisdom, knowledge of things in themselves. To make practical the sublime metaphysics of theosophical philosophy, it is necessary to apply them in every phase of human experience. The turning of the annual cycle is an event, like every other event in time, which has deep occult significance. To learn such meanings is to exhaust the experience of the plane wherein we are now active. H.P. Blavatsky was one who knew what are the meaning and the times of the cycles. For she wrote, to be brief, it is January the 4th which ought to be selected by the Theosophists, the esotericists especially, as their new year. January is under the sign of Capricornus, the mysterious Makara of the Hindu mystics, the Kumaras, it being stated having incarnated in mankind under the 10th sign of the zodiac. For ages, the 4th of January has been sacred to Mercury Buddha or Thoth Hermes, as everything combines to make of it a festive to be held by those who study ancient wisdom. This year it was brought to the students' attention that the Theosophical New Year is not always on January 4th. This year it falls on the 2nd. Next year it will be the 3rd, and then we'll go back to January 4th the following year. This is due to Earth's circulation around the sun, and the whole thing moves in areas we are not aware of. What are the thoughts on the New Year? The custom of greetings and resolutions at the birth of the New Year is not peculiar to Christian nations only. It has prevailed in all ages, and with many peoples has had a deeper meaning than the now given it. Whatever may have been the division of the year into solar or lunar months, as adopted by various peoples, the beginning of the year always had relation to return of the sun from his farthermost course, a return which brings with it revivifying influences to all the kingdoms of nature. These influences touch the inner life of all form and give a renewed impetus to expansion and growth. To mankind, there comes a new and fresh vigor to all his channels of life from within outwards, gradually strengthening as the sun moves nearer. The ancients, being aware of this fact and realizing that life is one through all its manifestations, took advantage of the birth of the year to reaffirm their highest aspirations, that consciously seizing the opportune time. In regard to this, H.P. wrote, "Let no one imagine that it is a mere fancy, the attaching of importance to the birth of the year. The earth passes through its phases and men with it, and as a day can be colored, so can a year. The astral life of earth is young and strong between Christmas and Easter. Those who form their wishes now will have added strength to fulfill them consistently." So, we do make resolutions as to how we are going to change our lives. Why is it that we do not? And why is it that we fail to keep them? There must be a reason for our failures, as well as for the fact that there comes a certain season in the year when we have the inclination to make resolutions. The reasons lie hidden in the depths of our own being. Unconsciously to ourselves it may be, we have a natural perception of occult law in our observance of this particular period of the year. As just read, the ancients celebrated the return and the new birth of the sun, which begins on December 21. When the sun rays become warmer and stronger, all the other forces behind the sun itself and behind ourselves become stronger within us. So in this rising wave of the spiritual and psychical renewal, all that we desire to do has a greater impulsion than at some other time of the year. The reason for our failures is that we do not understand our natures. Consequently, we're not able to use the force and influence that lie within us so far as we are physically concerned, and we have difficulty in endeavoring to carry out resolutions of any kind. Well, the first mistake we make is that we make negative resolutions. We make negative resolutions. I will not drink, we say. I will not lie, we say. But whatever it is we say, we're not going to do it. Whereas the proper result to make is that I will do this, the opposite of what we are doing. In the case where we say I will do this, make a direct affirmation of the will. Direct affirmation of the will. Well, the other form of resolution puts us in a purely negative position. Perhaps we think that we are good because we do not do a number of things. On the contrary, We are merely not bad. Again, a negative position. True goodness is a positive position. The effect of our resolution, we have to call on the will of man, for that will is not restrained by any form or obstacle whatever. This is our ordinary will. We are prone to think that a person who's very determined on gaining his ends has a strong will and is very positive in his character. But such a person exhibits only one kind of will. He has very, very strong desires, rather than will itself, and will follow them out, which is his desires. There are many exhibitions of the will, some phases being quite unrecognized. We would not be alive if the will to live is a recognized aspect of the will. It is not the body which holds us here, but the desire to live. Always behind will stands desire. There is also a mental phase of the will which can be cultivated by practice, fixed attention, concentration in certain direction, capable of effecting desired results. But the real and true will is known as the spiritual will, which flies like light and cuts all obstacles like a sharp sword. It is that will proceeding from the highest spiritual part of our nature which causes man to be an evolution from within outwards to all the forms that have been and continue evolving instruments in this state of matter. We were once conscious of our spiritual nature, but as we came down through the planes of matter to this plane, we made growth in intellectuality at the expense of spiritual perception. We are always using our intellect or reason from premises to conclusion, whereas the spiritual nature has the power of direct cognition of the nature of anything regarded. So our intellectual gain was at the loss of the spiritual insight. And it is useless for theology, science, and psychology to proceed from the personal and physical perceptions in order to get an understanding of what man really is. Their psychological causes are but reflections of the physical ideas. We begin to see the light by the very affirmation of our spiritual nature. What is most necessary for us is a proper basis for thinking. We need to eject the false idea of our being weak, sinful creatures, with all the faults of our parents and their parents before them, because, well, we're born that way. We need to eject the mental idol of an outside creator. We need to understand the purpose of life, to see that we are the product of many of our own prior lives, and to recognize an evolution under law, the law both true and merciful, which operates everywhere. It is because law operates in a round of impression that we have the tendency each year to make New Year's resolutions. We could, by an understanding and using of this law of recurrence, bring into effect those resolutions. We make them often because it is kind of proper to make them with real no expectation to keep them. Well, we remember them for a few days, then gradually all desires assert themselves and we find ourselves trolling along the old way. These kinds of resolutions will do us no good if we don't sustain them. A desire is not a condition. A mere desire will never get us anywhere. We have to maintain the desire. We have to stick to the resolution. We have to exert our will and cleave to the object of that will throughout. We can't get rid of evil by thinking of it. We can't get rid of unpleasant thing by thinking about it, because we're attached. So the harder we don't think about the evil things in us, the better. Think about their opposites, and the evil will not have a chance to return. Attachment is by thought, first of all. Desires exist in thought, first of all. Then follows the action. So we have to have a firm basis for our thinking if we are ever going to express ourselves as the spiritual beings. We have our pet theories of life, pet religions, and philosophies. Why? Why do we have them? Because they conform to our own desires, not because they conform to truth or that they are an explanation of all the mysteries we say about us. That is why, after so many thousands of years of what we call civilization, we have become none the wiser. It's still moving in the same old treadmill of life and death, sorrow, suffering, and pain. We are not bound to it, save as we bind ourselves to our own thoughts and actions. We are not under the necessity of following along those lines of error, as we have been doing all along. There is a chance for us if we understand our own natures. Then let us resolve one great thing. Resolve to know. Resolve to think right, do right. Resolve to acquire some knowledge that always has existed. The knowledge of man as a spiritual being through all his fluctuations in the realm of matter. As we rely more and more upon self within, we begin to express and use the power which we already have, and that is far more than we imagine. We have to help ourselves by taking the suggestions already given in the teaching of Theosophy, which are their suggestions. And then, as the sustaining power of the will is held along the line in which we desire to do, more direct help comes from those elder brothers who, at every hour of each day, are willing and anxious to meet those clear-eyed enough to see their true destiny and noble-hearted enough to work for the great orphan humanity. Mr. Judge has an article about an allegorical umbrella. And if we transform that into a allegorical New Year, we see that Mr. Judge had put the handle in the hand of the man himself. He wrote for the common man, for the mind of the race, but he wasted no effort to attract the intellect to cajole the sophisticated taste, nor to impress the worshippers of effect. The principles he dealt with would never be grasped by these subtle materialists, and the great moral ideal fundamentals to spiritual evolution, which is the doctrine of the masters, could be seen in his writings. Soul testing is often in minor circumstances, as in major events, but perhaps oftener in smaller things, since they are always with us. Mr. Judge complimented HPB's tremendous voyagings upon the ocean of theosophy by short cruises, beginning at the shore that was shallow enough that it would not overwhelm the understanding of a child. His passenger, embarking in the simple vessel which lined the coast, are not usually aware how easily they pass the breakers and gain open sea. Nor do they realize at first, so modest are the accommodations provided, that their journey is in reality no shorter than it would have been had they sailed before the mast with HPV. So, the quiet confidence of Mr. Judge communicates a confidence in every man and in the potential power of every mind, is the same in kind as HPB's magnificent challenge to the human soul. His faith was her faith, and the faith of their mutual teachers. Out of this faith, he pronounced the credo. We implicitly believe that in this curve of the cycle, final authority is the man himself. It is a faith expressed in countless ways throughout the length and breadth of his theosophical work, and is the unfailing spiritual encouragement that pervades his writing. So, over the years, to this undercurrent of Mr. Judge's brotherhood with those who read his writings and have learned by reason of his occult repetitions that the handle is indeed in every man's hand. Especially at the time of the New Year, is it for each one to sense his spiritual powers, to feel the beneficence of the teacher's presence, and to look with them into the principles of things. Then confidence being renewed in the spiritual available, and to look with them into the principles of things. Then confidence being renewed in the spiritual influences available to the eager mind and aspirant heart, every man strengthens his link and the whole chain out of regard for one goal in view. It may be that once the import of the allegorical umbrella is grasped, all our changing days, by the light of the spiritual sun, will be allegorical New Years, each with its birth vision of the possibilities of the cycle. Thank you.